So I'm going to talk about mental illness and how it has grown from the 1900s to now and why it's important. The reason why it's important is because most of us either know somebody that has mental illness, we might have one, you're going to find somebody in your life that has a mental illness, and it's kind of important to know why it's so important to know why they have it, because you might meet them and be like, oh, they're avoiding me because, well, they might be depressed, and they'll tell you that, and there's a reason why they'll tell you that, instead of beforehand when they just like, I have depression, I'm going to go leave now. Because back in the 1900s, instead of being diagnosed with a mental illness, they would just say, oh, you've sinned in some form or fashion, so you're possessed by some form of evil, which is completely wrong. But back then they were more religious based, so that's why they said that. But then around World War II, they started to realize, okay, this isn't something religious, there's something chemically wrong in their brain, they're mentally ill. So they started to try to break it down into different categories and started to make the first DSM, which is what psychologists use to figure out what's wrong with people, what kind of medication they could use to help them, and just different therapies they could use to help them. That was really the first attempt they actually started to actually help people instead of just sending them away because it was a dishonor to their family and they just didn't want to deal with it because they didn't know. And then nowadays, we actually help people. They're more likely to give you medication because sometimes it's not, you can just sit there and be like, well, if you have schizophrenia, you can't be like, well, I see a unicorn that follows me and it's going to eat my face off, because I don't know if that's what somebody with schizophrenia sees, but they might. So you can't really talk about that. That's just, you're chemically not right, so you have to take medication. But they also are more likely to sit down and talk to you if you have like anxiety or depression to see what's causing that, so that you can try to fix it yourself, so that maybe your brain can sort things out and you can get better and function in today's society without having to worry about having a panic attack or just having so much depression you can't physically do anything. Because it's still hard to go up to somebody and be like, hey, I have depression, I can't physically get out of bed today. But nowadays, you're at least able to explain it and most people can understand. Now, going back to the 20th century, the reason why that's important is because you have to know where we started to understand where we are now. Like I said, the early 20th century was very religious. We all know about that when, say, the Christians went, or this might be earlier, but predating, Christians would go on crusades and stuff, and they would just pillage villages and stuff, because if you weren't Christian, you were just evil. You needed to die. And that's kind of how it was with mental illness. If you didn't act right and you like had an outburst in church, you were possessed by the devil. Get out of the family, go away, you're dishonored because something's wrong. But they only thought that because they didn't know you had something chemically not right in your brain that was making you behave this way. They didn't know that like you weren't creating enough serotonin, and that's why you would have days where you just couldn't get out of bed to go to church, or you would be in church and you'd be fine, then all of a sudden you'd see something. It wasn't a demon or something evil or sin leaking into your body and forcing you to behave that way. It was something wrong. But we didn't have the science or the knowledge to know back then that it's not anything religious. Like, you could be religious, but that's scientifically not what was happening. So we fast forward a little bit when we have a little bit more science. We've done a little bit more research into the human brain and how it works. And they start to realize, okay, we were wrong. There is something wrong with you. We're going to try to figure out what's wrong. Now, they still weren't perfect with it, but they started to actually try, and they began to make the book called the DSM, which is what psychologists use to put all of the knowledge they have now, which this was the first attempt ever to actually try to put it all in one thing, so that if something was wrong with you, you could actually get treatment. There still was limited treatment, but they were beginning to help. So around World War II, I guess because, you know, all the war people are getting more depressed, they're getting PTSD, all this, they're probably like, okay, they just went to war, there's no demons or anything over there. They're messed up all of a sudden. I don't know what's wrong. We need to fix these soldiers because we can't have a whole town of people killing each other. So they continue, do more research, and then we are where we are today, where you have knowledge, you can get medication, you can get counseling, everything you need. So that's pretty much how we've grown throughout the years. So now you at least understand why there's such emphasis on mental illness now, because we went from that.